Good morning, everyone. I'm Tom Hopkins. I'm a member of the FMJ team, and my day job is as curator of aircraft at the Royal Air Force Museum. I'm going to ask our panelists now to introduce themselves, and I'll start with Rach, please.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Louise and Tom. So my name's Rachel Moss. I'm a freelancer for arts education and evaluation. I've been working for 20 years in museums and galleries, and I worked for 9 years as the Young People's Programmes Manager at the National Portrait Gallery, which has led to me being really passionate about what happens to young people when they leave these amazing kind of initiatives, but how do they get into the sector? How do we create an open playing field for everybody? So that's why I'm here today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sarah?
Hello, my name's Sarah Gore, and I work and have worked for the last 5 or 6 years for Norfolk Museum Service, where I manage their teaching museum programme, which is a programme which seeks to broaden entry routes for people wishing to work in the sector.
And Kate?
Yeah, good morning, everyone, and nice to be here. So I am also a freelancer. I specialise in audience and commercial development, and my background is a mix of museums. So I used to work at the National Gallery. I headed up the events team there. At the Natural History Museum, I did all the fun public events and sleepovers, and I've always sort of been involved in very large teams because that's generally what you find in events. And I am currently, as part of various different projects, rolling out a new framework called Equality in Focus, which started off as a solution for the film industry and now hopefully for the arts, which is very much looking at trying to help people navigate very complicated biases in the industry, trying to make recruitment more fair, try and make a more inclusive environment, and see where we can fill the gaps in terms of representation.
Thank you, and it's fantastic to hear that so many other people are working on making recruitment and application processes fairer and more accessible as well, which is what this session is all about. This is sort of also the heart of Fair Museum Jobs, trying to make museum job recruitment fairer. There are lots of practices that we felt were very unhelpful and perpetuated inequalities across the sector, and we're actively campaigning for institutions to adopt better practices, and we'll call out bad practice when we see it. So the session is going to be in sort of two quite loose halves. We're going to talk about the bad practice to start with, because the fact is not everybody knows that it's bad practice all of the time. And just explore why certain practices are bad. And then we're going to look at ways in which we can actually make positive action to improve things. So I'm going to start off by talking about the importance of advertising salaries, because occasionally you do see a job which has a salary described as competitive. Or something similar along those lines, but the key fact is that they're not revealing any information about the salary to start with. Why is that practice bad, and does it have any benefits? Would anybody like to start? I'll go to Louise.
I think I just want to echo something I actually said in the session I gave over breakfast this morning about research and organisation. And I'm really that the Fair Museum Job stance on this is that things that are salaries are numbers, and things that aren't salaries is anything else.
Yeah, you can't really be paid in words, can you?
Or profile or experience. Your landlord's not going to take your profile as rent money.
No, they're not. Nor is the supermarket for your food. But do anybody else have any thoughts on undisclosed salaries? Rach.
Thank you. So I predominantly work with young people. I've written a report recently that I'm happy to share, which hasn't gone up yet on the Tate website. It doesn't look very exciting because it's printed in black and white, but it's called What Next? Supporting Young People from Underrepresented Backgrounds into Creative Careers at Tate and across the sector. So this was an evaluation report I wrote for Tate, the Roots In programme, which is part of the Young People's programme at Tate. So I thought, in the words of some young people, we could answer that question. A couple of the TCPs, Tate Collective Producers, I interviewed them about this kind of aspect, and they said, one of them said, paid work evens out an individual circumstance. It gives opportunities to young people based outside of London. And if you don't know what a salary is, how can you apply for a job? Because you need to know whether you can afford to move potentially to a place, to live there, to travel, to eat, all these things that we all need to do. You know, as Louise and Tom has said, you can't pay in words. I saw an advertisement for a paid internship recently. What does that mean? What are you paying? Great, you're paying it, but what are you paying in? You know, as Louise said, there were no numbers attached to it. And living wage is the other thing. So for paid traineeships, internships, apprenticeships, you know, ideally it would be more than that, but at least we want living wage or London living wage, and we want employers to sign up to that. So somebody else, one of the other young people said, London living wage allows you to have a choice in where you want to work, not just taking a role for money. And you know, I think this is really important. I think it doesn't really matter what stage of your career is. I know when I see competitive salary, I'm just like, well, I have absolutely no idea what that means. Does it mean an organisation hasn't actually sorted out the funding for this, or does it mean that they will try and pay you as little as they can? It just doesn't bode well. So I think it doesn't matter what stage of your career you're at, you need to know what a salary is, so that you need to know how much you can pay and that you can live.
I think a really important question here is, what does the word competitive mean? Competitive to who? Competitive to the applicant or competitive to the organisation? And competitive could still also mean, as you said, Rach, like it could be a race to the bottom. Like, how much can we get away with? And that's something that I think really flags with us at Fair Museum Jobs when we see that.
And one point I've just thought of linked to that is something that I've certainly noticed, because I've always worked in the trading arms of large museums, is what is competitive to the trading arms is very different to what's competitive to the main sort of charitable side of the museum. And more often than not, where I've seen competitive, it is from the trading arms, because they can actually compete. They're not as restrained by sort of full disclosure that the charities are. So that's just one thought that I definitely think there is a need for some consistency in terms of understanding what the value is that the sector offers to people in terms of salary. It's certainly something I've been looking at from a freelance perspective of essentially what is the value that people have at different levels of their freelance career, and how can we make that a bit more transparent so people aren't sort of kind of competing themselves down and down and down in terms of price and then devaluing themselves and their offer. I think another thing I was thinking is it's also about respect for people's time in applying. I think this is something you feel really strongly when you're a freelancer, but it's absolutely the same if you are in-house as well, is that these are people who are spending hours trying to apply, you know, meeting your terms, completing their CV, if they've been taught how to do a CV, have they, you know, what's their background? And I think even by just not making it even harder for them to figure out if they're going to be suitable for the role by not having a salary, it just puts another barrier in the way. It's potentially hours of their time wasted if they suddenly get to interview and realize that they couldn't afford it in the first place. So I just think the more that we can do to simplify the process for people and get them to manage expectations, but also is it worth your time in reviewing everything? So I think it's just about respecting people and not just seeing them as a piece of paper.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and also interesting what you said about trading arms as well. I'm thinking about the example of Head of Coffee, I think it was at Tate, and people were some people were complaining that it was too much because it was more than the curators were being paid, which I think is completely the wrong way around of looking at it. That actually Head of Coffee is a responsible position for an organisation as big as Tate. And what we should be asking is, why are the curators not paid that similar commercial rate? Because they've also got a lot of responsibility. Sarah, did you have
Just that, I mean, the time wasting thing. I mean, I just would not waste any time making an application. There used to be some kind of idea that people worked in museums could only do it. I've heard people say, you know, if you've got a partner with a salary or whatever, and I'm not underrepresented. Middle class white women with degrees in art history are not underrepresented in the sector, but you know, this is a single income house, and I know what I need to be able to keep things running. So it kind of perpetuates this myth that it's kind of a vanity project for nice girls or whatever. And I mean, when you even said about the trading arm thing, still, who are competing with similar jobs in the sector? I just don't know what it means. Competitive. It just has no meaning whatsoever, and it just means that it makes me think they haven't worked it out yet. And if they haven't worked it out yet, well, how do they know what they're looking for? It's lazy. And they should just have they should have a budget. So they must know what they can pay up to, and shame on them if they're thinking they're going to try and negotiate people down. It's just, you know, the idea that it used to be it was unseemly to want to know how much you're being paid, but I think it's unseemly not to declare how much, you know, what value you place on the job you're advertising. Unseemly.
I think there's a really important point that's coming through in one of the comments about the discrimination that it causes. It does discriminate. It perpetuates discrimination against people coming from not a wealthy background. But we also know, and there's a lot of research about it, that people who are already marginalized, people of color, people, working class people, anyone who's underrepresented has less negotiating power. So if you're advertising a competitive salary, but you have a statement on your website that says you're committed to inclusion, you're not. You're saying you are, but you are not. You are not living that value. And I think that's, again, something we're really noticing. And I don't want to be dumping on particular organizations, but we've been recently talking on Twitter about the practices at the V&A. Every single one of the jobs on their website that's listed as internal currently says competitive salary. If you don't even want to tell people who already work for you how much they could get paid in a different role, what are you doing? I just can't express how awful that is. You're not even treating the staff you have well, let alone the ones that you're trying to recruit from outside.
There's also a lot of evidence that it disadvantages women against men, and I think that's obviously a massive factor in a sector that is 81% female. I think was the statistic I heard going around, and you just got to look at organisations that are perpetuating the practice of undisclosed salaries, and then seeing that the majority of their senior leadership team are men. Yeah, I think the key takeaway is that there's no good reason to mask a salary. It perpetuates all sorts of inequalities, and just advertise it. And Fair Museum Jobs will rigorously call out organisations that don't do that. And when we do that, we ask for your support. I'm going to move on now to the issue of qualifications. We see a lot of qualifications on personal specifications for jobs in the sector. I think we're seeing less of them now, but I think going back 5-10 years, it would be almost routine to see at least a BA requirement. Is that really necessary for the majority of museum jobs? Kate?
I think some of this will come down to which area of the museum you're applying to, because obviously there are some specialisms. I'm thinking, you know, particularly when working at the Natural History Museum, you know, obviously we had scientists and you know, there's a certain degree of experience you need. But I mean, certainly when I was recruiting events professionals, I noticed at the beginning part of my career, when I was recruiting people, it was almost just like it was set in stone, just BA, you know, 2-2-2-1. And it wasn't until we sat back and questioned it, why, you know, this is an events job. Like if you've left school at 16 and been running projects, you know, talks, even sort of just a very you know, any approach that means you have common sense and you're organized and you're a good people person, any of that would mean you could run an event. So why are we suddenly saying you have to have a degree? And so we quite quickly started putting or equivalent experience. And I think that was a good step forward. However, one of the things I've certainly been learning about recently is this idea that even experience is hard to get. And I think it is really something about the very sort of regimented process a lot of museums go in terms of analysing applications means there's very little room to interpret that actually somebody hasn't ever run an event before, but they do look like they've got the right approach. And maybe they just haven't had the opportunities to work for free on a, you know, in the evenings and get the experience that somebody else would have. So I've also sort of been reflecting that and thinking, what else can we do as part of that analysis to be able to find people that are actually talented? They just haven't had the same route into getting either a qualification or experience that other people, perhaps more privileged people, would. And I think that's the next step we need to go through. And it's hard because obviously you want to have full transparency and you want to have really clear evaluation measures to make it fair. But this is, for me, this is the big difference between equality and equity. And that's where we're a bit behind.
I think that's a really interesting point. On the Fair Museum Jobs Manifesto, we make the point that where you ask for qualifications, as an absolute minimum, you must also accept equivalent experience. In some ways, though, I don't think that that view goes far enough, and I think it's something that we will want to revisit, because it leaves unanswered the question, what does equivalent experience even mean? And as you said, getting experience isn't easy, especially if you're talking about people trying to get voluntary experience. You need a certain amount of financial security to undertake volunteer roles in lieu of paid work. So I think we may well be moving into a new direction in the future that instead seeks to ask, what would you get from a qualification that would enable you to do a job? And ask for those skills, that knowledge, those attributes, rather than just lazily asking for the qualification itself. Because you can get those skills and attributes in any number of scenarios, not necessarily just in university. Louise?
Yeah, I just really want to kind of add to that a bit, that if you list the skills that are needed for a job, then you can accept any method of gaining those skills. So someone who has a qualification can use that as their evidence. Someone who has volunteer experience can use that as their evidence. Paid experience, experience from outside the sector, working in a shop, working in a cafe, in a pub, anything you could have done is then useful as evidence for that skill. The qualification just becomes kind of the conduit for the skill, rather than the application, the qualification itself having that kind of core meaning, I think.
Right.
Yeah, just to echo what you've both been saying. So I kind of almost have sort of three hats on today, I suppose, because you know, I've done a lot of applications myself for the sector, to get into the sector, but I've also done quite a lot of shortlisting. I've been on senior management, and I also work directly with young people, and have experience talking to trainees and young people via the take report that I talked about. And it's interesting because a lot of people don't know what equivalent experience means, and I've been in interviews with people where I will ask questions and they're like, they can't think of anything. And I'm like, but I can see from your application that you work in a pizza place and we're talking about customer service. And then they go, oh, well, I've done that kind of thing before. And just as Louise was saying, just, you know, to actually give examples, or to say these are the skills and you could have got this skill in these kind of environments. It doesn't, you know, it doesn't have to be, like Kate was saying, with events. A lot of these things, you can get the experience and the skills in other venues. It doesn't have to be museums and galleries. And I think it is quite rare these days that you actually need qualifications. Yes, you might need a health and safety qualification, you might need something for art handling, you know, which is about how you handle things properly. Or if you're conservator, some kind of technical, there will be odd qualifications, I think, that you probably need for your jobs. But overall, we don't need these. I'd just like to, if it's okay, read a couple of quotes again from a report from young people. So one of the young people says, needing an MA, and you talked about BAs, I still see people asking for masters for jobs, but I have a master's. Yes, it was quite useful. I had quite a nice year. Could I have done my job without it? Yes, I probably could have done, you know, definitely, I think. So needing an MA is a barrier to accessing certain roles. It is really frustrating. And someone else said, inclusive recruitment is important. Having not attended university at all, I felt blocked out as a result of not having a degree. Having passion, transferable skills and experience in organisations should be relevant, but is often not seen as valid. So that was somebody who didn't have a qualification, but did have experience within the sector and was still struggling. And she mentions the word passion, and I think there is a lot of debate at the moment about what we mean by passion. And I guess I see passion in a positive way, in the sense that if I'm interviewing someone or having a conversation with someone about a job, if they really want to do the job, you know, this is their thing and they can explain why, that is brilliant. But when we say passion, what we don't want is that people are doing a role where they're not getting paid, or they're not getting paid enough, or they're working ridiculous hours, or as you guys have sometimes put up on Twitter, you know, here's a role being advertised. It's not one role, it's about 4 roles in one job. So passion, we use passion a lot in the sector, and I think passion can be positive, but it can also be negative. And I just wanted to mention that there.
Yeah, I think that's quite an important point. I think passion can be used as a word by which all sorts of exploitation is swept under the carpet. I would also like to say that I have my dream job. It's still just a job, though. At the end of the day, I still have days when I get up in the morning and think, "Oh God, I really don't want to go to work." Yeah, just be wary of passion. But you put it much more eloquently than I could, Rach. Sarah.
I'm desperate to talk. So I recruit for entry-level jobs, so it is slightly different, but our minimum requirement is 4 GCSEs, including English and maths. And the thing is, that has not resulted in an influx of hundreds of applicants who simply have 4 GCSEs, including English and maths. But it does mean that if for whatever reason that is your situation, and it's quite difficult for people, most people that want to work in a museum would have made it their business to have got more qualifications. But if for whatever reason you don't have, it means that you're in with a shot. But I've never recruited anybody that doesn't have A levels. But I have recruited people that don't have degrees and they're still working in the sector. So you don't need to be frightened of. It doesn't preclude anybody who's got higher qualifications. It just shows that you understand that it just shows that you are more inclusive, and you can, if you're sick and you know what sort of person you're after, then you're in control of the situation as a recruiter anyway. So you can absolutely do away with degrees. And there's a lot of degree bashing in the sector, and a lot of people saying, well, I don't want to have a degree. And I just think, why wouldn't you want to have a degree? If you're really if you're passionate on one hand, and I am a bit anti-passion because I don't really know what it means, and I think that you can convey your passion in the words and the language you use and your body language and all that kind of thing, really. So you don't need to keep telling people that you're passionate, because I find it a bit scary. What are they going to do with their passion? You can, it's a wonderful opportunity to do a degree, and I'm a bit anti the sort of degree bashers, really, because I just think it's a great thing to do. I don't use my degree in art history in the course of my job, but I love the fact that I've got a degree in art history, because I just love looking at art, and I just think it's brilliant, and it's not even a luxury. It's part of our education, and I'm very anti the narrative around pointless degrees, and so I just like to champion the business of educating yourself in an area that interests you for the sake of spending 3 years doing it if you possibly can.
Yeah, I think degrees are a good thing, definitely. I enjoyed mine. I did classics, so again on the artsier end of the spectrum, has very little bearing on my job though, which is why I feel passionate. There, I said it, about not using degrees as selection criteria. Unless anybody else has anything to add about qualification, I'd like to move on. Rach.
Just really quickly, I thought it might be worth mentioning apprenticeships. I don't do tons of work around apprenticeships, but I keep going back to the Tate report, but it's a thing I've written most recently. One of the things that really interested me is that apprenticeships, a lot of people think that they're sort of early career things, but actually I know Tate, for example, can also use it for existing staff to upskill them. So it may be that you're in a role where it would be useful for you to have a qualification or some kind of upskilling that you didn't have in the first place, but you're already in that role, and there are opportunities to do that at a later stage. And I thought it might just be worth mentioning, because we've talked quite a lot about degrees and BAs and masters, and obviously there are other kinds of qualifications. We talked about equivalent, or we talked more about equivalent experience, I guess. But the young people I talked to, some of them said that apprenticeships do have sort of stigmas attached to them. I think they're seen, you know, maybe comparatively to degrees as being, you know, not as good, maybe. This is what some of the young people were saying, but I think it's always worth just realizing that at a later stage you can get additional qualifications, and this idea of upskilling.
Yeah, I think that's really important, and it's really important never to sort of stagnate in a role either. There's always opportunity to learn and grow, and I think once you stop doing that, you'll get bored. But yeah, I'm glad that you raised apprenticeships as well, and I'm also really glad that you're giving young people's voices to this session as well, because I think that's really important that they're heard.
I'll take this opportunity as well to mention that on Saturday we're running a session where Kids in Museums Youth Panel are helping us to rethink museum recruitment, which is going to include a recruiter privilege test, which I think is going to be really interesting. I will drop a link in the chat to signing up for that in a few moments as well.
Thanks, Louise. Yeah, so I'm going to move on now to a question about what else should be included on a job advert that is frequently left out. I'm going to start with maybe an easy candidate, and that is contact details to get hold of the recruiter. I think it's a little bit arrogant maybe to write a job description and think, right, this will answer absolutely every single question that a candidate may possibly have about a role. I mean, you've got to be really sure. Because you know, there will be things that you won't have included that people really need to know before they put the hours worth of work into applying, as you were talking about, Kate, earlier. But so often we see a job description where trying to get hold of the recruiter is really difficult. Are there any other omissions that we see coming up frequently? Kate?
I actually think this is changing, but one thing that's again sort of occurred to me in the time that I've been writing job descriptions is actually sort of selling the job. You know, sort of, I think historically a lot of institutions particularly, but a lot of, I think, arts generally, assumed everyone would just love to work here, which is probably true, but they didn't have to sell it. So it's just, here's the job, apply. There was nothing to excite you about it. And I do think this is changing, but again, thinking back to that sort of privilege point, is it makes an assumption that the people reading it should just assume that this is going to be a great job and somewhere you want to work. And if you as an organization don't make it sound really attractive and sort of highlight the benefits, highlight how they're going to help you with their career, then why would somebody that's never thought about a career in the arts even look at that? And so I think there's something about maybe the way we approach it, that it's about taking responsibility for getting people to read that job description who wouldn't otherwise have read it, perhaps?
I think that's an interesting point, and I think if you're recruiting and you want to get the best possible applicants, then definitely you should put some spin and polish on your advert. And it may be, as you said, somebody who isn't thinking about building a career in the arts and sees that, and then it inspires them to consider it as an option, whereas it may not have been considered at all before. Anybody else? Rach?
So I think use of language is really important, and I think we can kind of alienate people sometimes by what we write in our job adverts and our job descriptions, and I don't think people necessarily mean to, but I think I often see kind of acronyms or museum terminology or jargon, and if you're already in the sector, then you might know what that means, but otherwise, you know, why do we have to use this language? So when I worked at the South London Gallery, we recruited for the first traineeship, which was part of the kind of HLF. But HLF have changed their name, haven't they? Sorry, HLF, but I'll always think of you as HLF. But the action plan for the fire station, and we thought very carefully about what kind of language we should use. And one of the things we did was, and this is happening quite a bit, is we put in a statement, and it said, and I'm going to read it so I get the statement right, but we are particularly interested in individuals who are from backgrounds underrepresented in the arts sector. Now, at that point, we didn't give examples, and I've seen some great examples since. So like Somerset House put out a young producers role or something recently, and then they gave examples of how you might feel underrepresented. So, you know, you could be from a working class background, you could be non-white, you could identify as being disabled or neurodiverse. There was a whole list of things. And of course, you could identify as being quite a few of those when we think about intersectionality. And I'm very wary of putting people into boxes. But what was interesting about that was the first traineeship that I recruited for a number of years ago. What was really interesting was the successful candidate said to us afterwards that he had been in this position where he'd applied for loads of jobs. Nobody was interested in him. He'd given up, and somebody he knew, who was kind of acting as a mentor, sent him this and said, look at this statement that they've put in really big letters at the top of their job advert. They are asking you to apply. And he said, oh my God, like, this is me. You want me, so I am going to apply. And I thought that was really interesting, that he'd been applying for all these roles and getting really disheartened and feeling that people weren't particularly interested in him. But this felt to him like a kind of personal invitation to apply. Now, obviously, you have to be careful in recruitment. There are differences, and someone will probably know this better than me legally, but if your role is set up as a bursary, you can specify exactly what type of candidate you want. So you might say, well, this is an initiative for BAME people or non-white people, and you can do that. So when you're recruiting, what this kind of wording says is we want to diversify the type of applicant who is applying initially. And then, of course, when you're recruiting, you need to do it in a very kind of equitable way. And this individual got the job because he was the best candidate, not because he ticked the other boxes. But he wouldn't have applied for that job because he was so disheartened he'd given up, but he saw that statement. So language and an invitation to people to say, hey, we are actually interested in you. We're not just interested in the people who are already in the sector, who already have the qualifications, who already have the experience, who look exactly like us. You know, I work in gallery education. A lot of people look just like me. And I think that for me is the most important thing.
I think that's really important. I think going back to what you said about young people feeling that they simply can't get a job in the arts without a degree. And then the first thing we see on a personal specification is a degree requirement. And even if it says degree or equivalent experience, it's still more often than not putting that degree first, equivalent experience second, and often putting it right at the top as well. And I think that does make a difference to how things are perceived. Louise?
Yeah, I'd like to weigh in on something that I think feeds into some of what Rach has said, and is actually something that gets quite hidden, and that's actually the cost of going to an interview. I think something that really needs to be acknowledged, and something that should be standard practice, is paying the expenses of someone coming to an interview. You want them enough to interview them, and they've put in hours preparing to come and meet you and get to know you, and for you to know them. We all deserve to be reimbursed for that effort. I think it really closes off a lot of opportunities for people who just, like, you just can't drop 200 quid to travel to Manchester with 3 days notice to go to an interview, because that's how much the train could be at that, level. And I think there's something really difficult about that. And I really hope that something that can come out of 2020 is that there's none of this absolute trash about, oh, we can't possibly do Skype interviews, oh, we can't have Zoom interviews, we just can't do it, it's so terrible. Well, we've all been doing it for 9 months, so get over yourself. This is a much more open option. So pay travel, give alternative ways of doing that, because you are cutting off a lot of applicants who just won't be even able to afford to interview.
Also, there's an environmental sustainability aspect to this as well. My museum's got two sites, one in Shropshire, one in London, and a lot of shuttling between the two of them used to happen, and now 2020's happened. It's saving so much money and so much carbon emissions as well. Sarah, did you have?
Yeah, so I'm going to try and straddle those two streams. So further to what Rachel said, so we've got a statement very similar to the one you said, you mentioned about we're looking to recruit people who are underrepresented, and that does, and I'm not sure what the most recent job spec said, but it may have left it up to for individuals to interpret that themselves. So I had decided that next time to go further and absolutely specify. And what you can do is within the grid that you've got when you're interviewing people and what you're looking for, and the question about whatever, include something in the spec which asks people to reflect on their own experience and how this, I haven't got a form of words yet, but you can include something which enables people who come from a non-traditional background to reflect on their lived experience and why that makes them, new and interesting and worth employing. And you can actually weight it differently. So people can get double points for talking about particular things, which enables you, because a lot of programs and a lot of jobs always say, oh, we're seeking to diversify, but they're not doing anything, which actually they want to diversify, but it doesn't really mean anything unless you're completely explicit about what your current profile is, because it's a relative term, isn't it, to diversify from what you are already. And if you're not making active steps to do that, then it's just a wish, and you can wish for anything you like, but you've got to have concrete ways of doing that. So that is one thing that you can actually do, which helps people to kind of get themselves into the space that the candidate you're talking about at the South London, was it the South London Gallery, understood that you were talking to them. And the other thing was to do with, I don't remember now. Was it to do with we do pay expenses for our trainees, for people that come in from outside the area. And it used to be absolutely standard when it was just normal. You just submit expenses claims and they would get paid. And I suppose, I don't know when it stopped, 2008 maybe, and that it doesn't exist as a matter of course anymore. But we are looking at how. I would normally start recruiting around now for our next intake, but we've delayed it for obvious reasons. But next time we're going to be looking at ways in which we can use this kind of technology to broaden our interview process, because we used to bring all interested applicants to Norwich for a briefing day, and that was a stipulation of wanting to apply, which I got rid of after my first year, because I just thought it was ridiculous. In December, hundreds of people coming to Norwich to listen to me give a presentation. So I made a film about it and really front load the application process. So everybody who's even applying is in theory really clear about what we're looking for. I mean, half of the applicants ignore what I say anyway, but I mean, you know, I'm used to that, being a parent. But at least the information's out there. And then when they come for interview or assessment centre, we have 40 people coming over 2 days. But I think that we're definitely going to find a way of narrowing it, seeing more people on this kind of platform, and then maybe making a final decision like this, or having a smaller number of people come on one day or something. So I think this, you know, this revolution that's happened, this is a definite silver lining.
Rach.
Just to pick up quickly, there were a couple of things in the chat box. I know Louise has also answered. I've jotted down your report, your link, Louise, because that looks interesting. But I think it was Lucy was asking, with the statement I talked about before at the SLG, how do people feel? Does it make them think, well, if we're underrepresented, we're going to end up in an organisation where no one is going to really understand us or be able to work with us? And I totally agree with you. And I've seen examples. I've set up quite a lot of traineeships within organisations and as a freelancer. I think what was interesting, particularly about the SLG role, was that role sat within education. So there was a massive kind of range of experience of people in that room who'd worked with young people who lived on the local housing estates, young people who'd been on their kind of collective, quite a wealth of experience in terms of working with a range of kind of audiences. And I worked with the individual directly. It was a maternity cover that I was doing at the time when I set it up. And then that continued afterwards. I do think it's really difficult for individuals to go into organisations where they look around and they don't see themselves in anybody else, be it because you know, they're underrepresented in whatever way. So I do totally get what you're saying, but I think it's interesting that often these kind of roles sit in education because those are the people who are seen as maybe having the experience of working with diverse audiences. And just going back right at the start, Claire put in the chat box, what do you do with HR barriers? And this kind of relates, I think, because often, you know, and I am talking with my education hat on, so people might disagree, but often these kind of diversifying access do fall in the education camp. I mean, the report I wrote for Tate is in the young people's programme specifically, and one of the things that came out of Tate was that there do need to be more conversations with HR, and there do need to be more kind of tying up so that HR are working together. And apparently there is a kind of HR museum group, like I'm in the Young People's Programmes Network. There's I don't know what it's called. I don't know if Louise or Tom or anyone else knows about this, but that was something that Tate were hoping to kind of feed into, because there are people who work in HR across museums and galleries who are having conversations like a lot of us are. And I do think in some organisations there is definitely an HR barrier. So I just wanted to flag that up.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. I would say if HR is the barrier, if HR is the problem, then fix HR. I know that's not always easy, but I think using it as an excuse that the HR department and its policies are something fixed that can never change is not really helpful going forward. And I think this is where we all have to be advocates. If we believe something is really making problems, then we have to keep on making the case about why it should be changed and go into new directions. I'm going to ask now if there's anything else that the panel think would make application or interview processes fairer. Quite an open-ended question, for which I apologise. Also, like to say thank you to the panel for picking the questions up from the chat as well. It makes the chair's job a lot easier. So I admire that proactivity. But yeah, Rach, please.
I'd just like to flag up a report. I can try and put it in the chat box in a minute if I can work out the URL for it, but I read it a couple of weeks ago. It's called Young and Black, and it's a report by the YMCA, came out in October. And I found it really interesting that they have a statistic that says that 54% of young Black people feel bias or prejudice at the recruitment stage. For example, their names on CV. And this is the main barrier that they perceive going into employment. And 48% felt they needed to change their name on an application form. And that really upset me. Can you imagine you cannot even put your own name on an application form because you feel that someone will discriminate against you? And I was quite shocked by this because all the recruitment processes that I've been in, when I've been shortlisting, I've never seen a candidate's details. So it's the idea of kind of a blind application or a blind CV. And it made me question what other organisations are doing in terms of recruitment. So, you know, when you receive a pile of application forms, you shouldn't be able to see a person's name on the front page, you know, where they live, anything about them, their age, anything that could discriminate. You know, this idea of unconscious bias, that you might look at someone's name and think that. And that really upset me. And I thought, you know, I do recruitment, I work with young people, and I never really questioned that. But then maybe that's because of the processes that I've been involved in. So yeah, I just found that really shocking. And I think just thinking about application forms, we've been looking at paid traineeships and thinking about how you streamline application forms and ask direct questions and get a direct response, as opposed to putting in these big boxes and saying, you know, can you answer the what do you call it, essential criteria for the job? Because I think that is a real skill, you know, and actually, do we need all those, or do we just need direct questions? So quite a lot of the forms that we've put out recently, we've asked maybe 5 key questions, and also made it very clear on the forms that where we say, have you got, put your education experience or your job experience or whatever, if it's applicable, because maybe you don't have, maybe you've never had a job, maybe you don't have any qualifications, and these are for you know, particular roles that we're looking at for young people. I'm sure there are other things, but I want to make sure that everybody else has something else to say, so I will stop talking for a minute.
Thanks, Rach. Kate.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you, Rach, and I think again, I think this is something I've been reflecting on personally, and also because I've been sort of helping co-host some sessions on unconscious bias with experts in the field, and sort of looking at it from more of the perspective of the people hiring. One of the things that I just had never ever questioned was, even if you're successful with the blind assessment, which I agree is sort of where to aim for, this idea that if you actually want to make this a fair and representative industry to work in, the people assessing it need to completely change how they see a CV or an application. Because and I think particularly we've been in a sector where often you have the luxury of just being able to pick from this like pool of amazing, talented, passionate people, like we've, you know, said about passionate. You just got so much choice. And so of course, if you're trying to make a decision, why wouldn't you just get the top 10 that have all answered everything perfectly, they all look fabulous, and interview them? And I think this is the thing that I've really sort of realized that I've been responsible for, is by doing that, I haven't allowed for the people who just haven't ever had the training that maybe somebody else had on how to write the CV, or, you know, like you were just saying, like how do they answer that question? Or, you know, if you've got 2 like-for-like CVs with no identifiable criteria, and what you're saying is that you're viewing it from what you think someone would do the best job, you're again going to lose all those people that just have a different experience from you. So I think this is such a deep-rooted problem that it's almost that we need a complete overhaul of anyone that is responsible for recruitment, where they have to completely understand unconscious bias, implicit bias. Where are the gaps? We need data so that we can see where the actual gaps are, and then do positive action campaigns. There's so much to be done. And in a way, we're in a good position because we are a very you know, personally, my experience is that we are very accountable, and, you know, we've got very, you know, we've got these brilliant HR teams that are going out of their way to try and make this as fair as possible. But I think that it's more of a sort of implicit bias problem that we need to get into. And that's just going to take everybody questioning themselves and making sure that they really have gone way out of their way to find the right talent, which is hard and it will take a lot of time and money, but it's the right thing to do.
I think that's a really important point. Thanks, Kate. Louise?
I'd like to just pose what I think is a simple question that opens a massive can of worms. Who's asked people why they don't apply for jobs at their organisation? Who's gone out there and looked at who is missing from your organisation and said, why are you not here? How can we, what could we be doing to get you here? It's such a fundamental, like, we can't even sort out our audiences. We can't even welcome people as visitors into our organizations. Why on earth would someone want to work for us? Like, there's such a fundamental underlying question, and I'm 100% sure this is going to come up in the anti-racism in recruitment session tomorrow. Like, what environment are we all building? And I'm not saying nobody is doing that. A lot of people are, but a lot of organizations just expect magically that by saying we want to diversify, we'll magically become diverse. But that's just like saying words. It's not doing things.
I think raising audiences there is really important as well. And I think we need to take a holistic approach to the problems that museums have, and that you can't fix audiences without fixing the workforce. And I think that also equally applies the other way around. So thanks for that, Louise. And we've got a question about whether online interviews bring their own different barriers to entry and access. And I think they do, but I'm wondering if anybody's ever considered that in more detail. The one thing I'm thinking of is that Wi-Fi costs money. We all have to pay for the internet as much as I believe it should be a free public service of universal Wi-Fi. That's not the case, and people need devices as well, and they also cost money. So I think I think these do come with barriers. Other things as well, like talking about implicit bias. Maybe if you have some mahogany bookshelves behind you with many leather-bound books, you're going to create more of an impression.
I'll just jump in on this, Tom. We had that recent story of the actor who was being online reading for a role and overheard the director he was reading for saying something about these poor people in their tiny, crappy apartments. Oh, well, you know, get over yourself. Just like, sometimes it's as simple as the advice we should all internalize of just don't be a dick. Like, think about how you're treating other people in this whole process. Be nice and shut your mouth sometimes.
I wonder with all backgrounds as well becoming more sophisticated on programs such as these, whether or not it would be a mandatory requirement to blank out your background. That might be something that helps. I think this is all massively unknown for us though, and there's going to be a lot of learning going forward. Rach.
Sorry, I'm not doing the digital thing. You could see I'm in my children's bedroom, and yeah, the background thing and digital and whatever. Can I just go back to a point Louise was talking about? I've forgotten what the point was now. Sorry, but this idea of why should people want to come and work at organizations just because you put out this statement about being diverse and whatever. And one of the things that we've been thinking about is going out and having conversations with people, or offering sessions where people can come and find out more about the organisation and the role. So this idea of kind of open sessions. When I was at the South London Gallery for gallery assistant roles, they used to do sessions in the local job centre and sort of sit there, and people who came in could have conversations with them, because even though it was a big building in the local area, people wouldn't necessarily know what was inside. And for the traineeship role, we ran open sessions, and you can do that prior to a job. But, you know, so come and talk to us about it, ask us questions about the application forms, what you're kind of looking for, if you need any support, that kind of thing. You can equally ask people to apply and then run an open session as a kind of precursor to interviewing people. So we've done that before, and we've had sessions with 20 young people, and we've evaluated that to see how useful that was for them, and then maybe selected 5 to do a slightly more formal interview. So open sessions is a good idea, I think.
Thank you. We are coming up to time, so unless anybody has anything that they would urgently like to add, I think we're going to draw it to a close. There's some really good questions in the chat and lots to think about. And I'm sorry that we didn't get around to answering all of them. I mean, really, this session could be a lot longer than it was. But I'd like to thank our panel, Rach, Sarah, and Kate, for your contribution. Thank you for coming here. And I hope all of you attending found the session useful as well. And I hope they're going to be really good takeaways from it that you can take to your organizations and maybe think about what you can do as well if you are a recruiter to make things fairer. The session will be put up online afterwards if you want to catch up with anything, but that might not be for a little while. But yeah, thank you everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.